a desperate act under a bruised winter sky. Melissa pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, fighting the urge to look back. The engine hummed under her shaking hands. The air was thick with dread, but her mind spun with one frantic thought. This is the only way. Snowflakes, fat and slow, drifted through the dying daylight, landing on the windshield and dissolving instantly. Every flake felt like another second she was stealing from her own soul. On the passenger seat, Eli sat bundled in a thin blanket, the faded blue of it clashing with the bruises under his eyes. He clutched a worn-out rabbit plush, ears drooping, fur matted and gray from years of comfort. His legs didn't reach the floor, his boots dangling above a patch of dirty carpet. Melissa avoided meeting his eyes. She couldn't. Not now. If she did, she'd lose her nerve. She popped the door, her breath a plume of white in the cold. The riverbank near Asheville was a world apart from the bustling town, a stretch of silent woods, the river frozen except for a thin black vein of water in the center. Ice clung to the branches of naked oaks. The only sound was the sharp, distant crack of ice shifting on the river, and the low, uncertain whimper of a child about to understand something terrible. "Come on, Eli," she said, her voice too steady, too bright. She led him from the car, his mittened hand barely filling her palm. Each step away from the warmth of the heater was a small betrayal. She laid the blanket down at the edge of a fallen log, as far from the road as she dared. She knelt, adjusting his scarf, brushing his tangled hair aside with shaking fingers. Eli's breath fogged the air, each inhale a desperate shiver. He looked up, trusting, a little confused. He hadn't cried yet. Not really. Maybe he still believed she'd come back, or maybe he couldn't grasp what was happening. "I'm gonna be right back, okay? Stay here, baby. Hug Bunny tight. Mommy loves you." The words clawed at her throat, and she forced them out between clenched teeth. He nodded, clutching the rabbit so hard it squeaked. She stood up quickly, her chest tight. Every cell screamed at her to stop, to scoop him up and run, to never let go. But her mind was a swirl of memories and debts and sleepless nights. In her heart, she was convinced someone would find him. A kind stranger, a hiker, someone better. The system would care for him. He'd be safe. Her boots slipped as she hurried back to the car. She looked back just once. Eli sitting small and shivering, the blanket clutched around his shoulders, the rabbit tight in his arms. The woods looked impossibly big behind him, the sky purpling with the approach of night. She started the engine, hands trembling so hard the keys rattled in the ignition. Her whispered apology was lost in the wind as she drove away, the car tires crunching over frozen gravel. In the mirror, the boy and the woods vanished into shadow. The silent snow absorbed his cries. Eli's eyes were wide, fixed on the place where the car had been. His mouth opened, soundless at first. Then a thin, sharp cry tore from him. Animal, raw, not the word mommy, just a sound of need, of panic. The cold crept under his blanket, pinched his cheeks and nose. His breath came out in quick, uneven bursts, steam rising into the night. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Dusk pressed down, heavy and blue, squeezing the warmth out of the world. Eli huddled closer to his rabbit, rocking a little, the way his mother used to do when he was scared. The river whispered in the dark, ice groaning as it shifted, a fox barking somewhere deep in the trees. Every shadow looked like a monster, every crack of ice a threat. He whimpered, soft and constant. But nobody came. He tried to sing a song, one about sunshine, the kind his mother used to hum. The tune faltered on chattering teeth. The cold seeped through the blanket, through his jeans, into his bones. His fingers ached. He pressed the rabbit to his chest, burying his face in the ragged fur, inhaling the faint scent of home. Was this what being alone was? He thought of bedtime stories, brave boys in forests, children lost and found. He was always the one who cheered when they got rescued, never the one left behind. Tears welled, froze on his cheeks. He didn't dare stand up. He was afraid the dark would swallow him whole. The wind picked up, stinging his skin. He sobbed, small and shaking, rocking with his knees to his chest. His cries grew louder, desperate, until they echoed between the trees, thrown back at him by the empty woods. The world was uncaring, cold. No one answered. As night fell, the cold turned brutal. Eli's voice gave out. He could only whimper now, breathing in short, shallow gasps. He curled up tight, clutching the rabbit, its plastic eyes staring into the darkness with him. His mind drifted, drowsy, the line between awake and dreaming blurring. Maybe someone would come. Maybe he'd wake up warm, in his own bed, with his mother singing in the next room. But the only sound was the river and his own heart, pounding wild and alone under a bruised winter sky. Miles away from the icy riverbank, an old German shepherd twitched in his sleep beneath the sagging roof of a forgotten barn. Ranger's dreams were uneasy, images of fire, running feet, distant shouts, and the warm press of a gentle hand against his flank. In his mind, he was young again, a hero in a world that still needed heroes. But when he awoke, the world was silent and bitter cold, filled only with the ache in his aging joints and the hush of snow piling up at the doorway. Ranger stretched, his fur flecked with gray and stiff in patches, where old scars puckered the skin. A gust of wind rattled the boards, but that wasn't what brought him upright. Ears pricked. In the far distance, so far it could have been a memory, came the faintest echo of a child's cry. He froze, every muscle alert, heart hammering with a sensation he hadn't felt in years, a call to action, a summons to duty. It was as if the universe had reached out through the winter darkness and whispered, "Now." He pushed to his feet, limping but determined, snout raised to taste the wind. The air was sharp with the smell of frost and wood smoke, but under that, just barely, something else. Fear, helplessness, a child, alone and terrified. Ranger's world was a patchwork of loss, the farmstead abandoned, the humans he'd loved now only ghosts in the corners of his dreams. Yet something ancient inside him stirred, a promise made long ago to never stop protecting those in need. The snow was deep, clinging to his belly as he trotted out into the dark. Pain lanced through his bad leg, but he pressed on, guided by instinct and memory. His paws broke through the crust of ice, sending up tiny flurries. The wind howled, tossing branches overhead like skeletal fingers. Each step was a testament to will, not strength, but Ranger didn't slow. He moved with the single-minded focus of one who has nothing left to lose and everything to give. As he journeyed through the night, flashes of his old life flickered in his mind. A woman's laughter, children's hands ruffling his ears, the sharp scent of smoke and burning leaves in autumn. He remembered the nights he'd sat by the fire, head resting on a child's knee, content and certain of his place in the world. That certainty had been stolen by time, by abandonment, by the slow fading of every familiar face. But the cry in the night rewrote all that, reminding him of his purpose, his calling, his duty. The trek was long and harsh. Ranger crossed frozen fields and ducked under downed barbed wire, the sharp points tearing at his coat. He slipped on icy rocks, skidded, then caught himself and kept moving. Overhead, the stars blinked cold and distant, silent witnesses to his journey. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called, a mournful, lonely sound. Ranger pressed on, driven by the echo of the child's wail, the way it vibrated through his bones. Finally, after what felt like hours but could have been a lifetime, Ranger crested a ridge and looked down on the riverbank. There, barely visible in the shadow of a fallen log, was a small bundle, a boy, huddled and still, clutching something to his chest. The sight filled Ranger with both relief and dread. Relief that he had found the source of the cry. Dread at the fragile, motionless shape in the snow. He approached slowly, tail low but wagging, announcing himself with a soft, throaty whine. Eli didn't move at first, lost in the cold, eyes glazed with exhaustion and fear. Ranger circled him, nose working furiously, reading the boy's scent, a cocktail of terror, loneliness, and the faint, heartbreaking odor of abandonment. Carefully, Ranger nudged Eli's shoulder with his nose, a gentle question. "Are you alive? Are you here with me?" Eli flinched, hugging the rabbit tighter. He blinked, unsure if this was real or just another dream in the swirling dark. But the warmth of the dog's breath, the solid weight of his furry body, cut through the numbness. Ranger pressed closer, his side to Eli's back, sharing what little heat he could muster. The boy shivered, then pressed in, the instinct to survive overriding his fear of the unknown. For a long while they simply sat together, an old dog and a frightened child, ringed by winter and night. Ranger licked the tears from Eli's cheeks, rumbled soft sounds of comfort, and watched the shadows for threats. In the silent exchange, a bond began to form, not of words, but of need and hope, fragile and new. The snow kept falling, erasing the tracks that had brought them together. The cold pressed harder, but Ranger refused to move. He curled his body around Eli, offering his own warmth as a shield. The pain in his joints faded beneath a sense of purpose that felt holy, urgent. Eli, for his part, clung to the dog, feeling, if not understanding, that he was no longer alone in the vast, uncaring woods. Above them, the sky churned with snow and moonlight, indifferent to their struggle. But in that small circle of warmth, a flicker of hope survived. The world had abandoned them both, but together they made a promise. To hold on, to endure, to survive the night. Night in the Blue Ridge was never gentle, but for Eli it unfolded like a test. The darkness pressed in thick and silent, swallowing the edges of the world until only a boy, a battered rabbit plush, and a battered old dog existed at the heart of a circle of fading warmth. Ranger curled around Eli, sharing every ounce of body heat he had. The boy clung to him, small hand gripping coarse fur, his face buried deep in Ranger's neck. Every now and then, Eli's tiny body trembled with sobs that barely made a sound, the energy for crying nearly spent. The snow muffled everything, no cars, no voices, just the crackle of ice on the river and Ranger's labored, rhythmic breathing. Each breath a cloud in the freezing air. In the hush, Eli's mind spun with images that made no sense. He saw his mother's face, the car's red taillights vanishing between the trees, the rabbit plush, named Bunny, who had always promised safety and comfort, but now seemed no more alive than the sticks and stones beneath them. He drifted in and out of sleep, every dream edged with fear. Each time he started awake, panic flooded him. Where am I? Where is Mommy? But then Ranger would nudge him gently, a rough tongue swiping his cheek or his ear. The boy would jerk in surprise, then melt back against the dog's warmth, drawing courage from the living heartbeat pressed against his ribs. The first hour after sunset felt endless. Eli's teeth chattered, his feet ached, and the tips of his fingers lost all feeling. He hugged Bunny tighter, rocking slowly, whispering the song his mother had sung to him at bedtime. The words faded into the wind, barely more than a sigh, but Ranger listened, as if they were the most important sound in the world. Occasionally, the old dog would shift, using his big head to nudge Eli's dropped mitten back toward his hand, or to gather the rabbit plush when it tumbled away. In the deep woods, time lost all shape. Sometimes the boy thought he heard voices, his mother, a stranger, a distant promise of rescue. He would jerk upright, peering into the swirling snow, hope lighting his face for a heartbeat. But each time it was just the wind, a fox yipping far away, or the branches scraping against one another overhead. Every disappointment hollowed him out a little more. Ranger, too, was fighting his own battle. Age clawed at him, his joints stiff and screaming from cold. But he wouldn't give in. He kept watch, ears swiveling for threats, tail flicking away snow from Eli's back. His mind dipped into old memories, a child's laughter, a home full of light and warmth, the nights he'd slept under tables while someone read stories aloud. He remembered the trust of children, the unspoken promise that he'd always protect them. Tonight, that promise was all that kept him moving. Hours passed. The wind grew sharper, slicing through Eli's thin blanket. He whimpered, his body curling tighter, but even shivering became exhausting. Ranger licked the boy's cheek, then stood up, shaking off snow. He limped into the trees, nose low, searching for anything that might help. A scrap of fabric, a deeper hollow in the ground, some way to break the wind. He found a clutch of dead branches and nosed them back toward Eli, trying to pile them up to shield the boy. Then he lay back down, curling himself as tightly as possible around Eli, covering him like a living blanket. Eli buried his face in Ranger's fur. The world shrank to the dog's rough coat, the faint scent of earth and old smoke, and the slow, steady thump of a heartbeat. He cried quietly, whispering questions to Bunny and to the dog, questions without answers. Why did Mommy leave? Is she coming back? Am I bad? Ranger listened to every word. When Eli's sobs grew frantic, the old dog pressed his head into the boy's chest, rumbling low in his throat, a sound that meant, I'm here. I won't leave you. Somewhere in the night, Eli drifted toward sleep. His body grew heavy and numb, his mind foggy. In that gray space between waking and dreaming, he saw Ranger not as an old, scarred stray, but as a knight, tall, brave, golden in the moonlight, standing guard against monsters. In his dream, Ranger barked, and the darkness fled. For a moment, Eli felt safe, and that feeling clung to him even as the cold tried to pull him under. But the danger was real. A coyote barked in the distance, sharp and wild. Ranger lifted his head, ears up, body tense. He growled, a deep warning, and Eli stirred, clutching the rabbit tighter. The dog's body was a barrier, his presence a shield. The coyote called again, but farther away, unwilling to approach something that could fight back. The sky above cleared for a while, revealing stars cold and sharp as glass. Eli blinked up at them, every bone aching, eyes burning from cold and tears. He wondered if his mother was somewhere under the same sky, if she missed him, if she was crying too. The night dragged on. Eli lost track of time, drifting in and out of consciousness, always waking to Ranger's steady warmth. Sometimes the boy shivered so hard his teeth rattled. Sometimes he went limp, sleep nearly claiming him for good. Each time Ranger nudged him back, refusing to let him drift too far. The last hours before dawn were the hardest. The cold seeped deeper, hope seemed thinner than air. But Eli, half awake, buried his face one last time in Ranger's coat. He breathed in the dog's scent, his sobs growing quieter, as if some small part of him understood he was not alone. Not anymore. And when the morning light began, at last, to trickle through the trees, Eli and Ranger remained together, boy and dog, two cast-offs clinging to each other, the first spark of trust glowing in the harsh winter dark. When the first pale streaks of dawn began to cut through the tree line, the woods did not magically become safer. Instead, the new light made the world look even more strange. Blue shadows stretching between the trees, the riverbank rimed with thick ice, the air still sharp as broken glass. But dawn meant they had survived the night. For Eli and Ranger, that was a kind of miracle. Ranger was the first to move. His body ached from the cold, and when he stood, his hind leg dragged a little, the old wound slowing him, but his eyes were clear, his breath pluming out in tight little puffs. He nosed Eli, who whimpered, half awake and then curled tighter into a ball. The dog circled, pushing against the boy's side, whining softly. A nudge, a summons. We have to move. Eli blinked up at him, eyes swollen and rimmed with red, his cheeks raw from wind and tears. He tried to sit up, but his limbs felt heavy as stone. Still, when Ranger whined again, Eli listened. He crawled up, grabbing Bunny, and struggled to his feet. The old blanket clung to his shoulders like a cape. The cold bit deep, but now a strange stubbornness kept him going. Maybe it was the way Ranger watched him, or the faint hope that there might be someone, somewhere waiting for him. They set off together into the woods. Ranger led the way, pausing every few steps to glance back and make sure Eli was following. The snow came almost to the boy's knees. Every step was slow, clumsy. He kept stumbling, slipping on hidden roots and rocks. Ranger never left his side, circling back to steady him, sometimes pressing his shoulder into the boy's leg as if to lend him strength. The forest was silent except for the crunch of snow and the distant crack of ice shifting on the river. Occasionally, a crow called from high above, black wings slicing through the cold air. Eli tried to keep up, but after only a short distance he stopped and leaned against a tree, breath hitching in short, desperate pants. His fingers, even inside his mittens, were numb, his stomach clenched with hunger. Ranger came back and sat in front of him, eyes steady, breathing slow. He lowered his big head and nudged Bunny, which Eli had dropped in the snow. The boy reached for the rabbit, gripping it like a lifeline. Ranger whined softly, then moved off a little, staring into the trees. A new smell drifted on the breeze, faint but unmistakable. Wood smoke. Eli didn't notice at first, but Ranger did. He stood still, nose twitching, and then looked back at the boy, another whine, more urgent. Eli wiped at his face with the back of his sleeve. He didn't understand what the dog wanted, but when Ranger began to walk again, Eli followed, step by slow step, dragging his blanket through the snow. They moved deeper into the woods, the trees growing denser, shadows twisting along the path. Sometimes Eli stumbled and fell, and each time Ranger returned, licking his face or nuzzling him to his feet. Once, when Eli sat in the snow and refused to move, Ranger darted off, only to return with Bunny dangling from his mouth. He dropped the rabbit in the boy's lap, then barked, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to fill the empty morning with purpose. The trek was endless. Eli's boots grew soaked, his toes numb. The hunger became an ache, then just a hollow space. But every time he thought about stopping, Ranger appeared beside him, pressing close, sometimes even talking to him in low rumbles and growls, as if telling the boy to hold on, just a little longer. They passed fallen logs, icy branches, and at one point, the fresh tracks of a deer. Eli imagined what it would be like to be that deer, fast, strong, able to run all the way home in a single dash. But he was only a little boy, scared and tired and cold, and the world was so much bigger than he had ever imagined. Then, after what felt like forever, the woods began to thin. Through the branches, Eli could see a curl of gray smoke rising into the sky. His heart fluttered. Maybe it was a campfire. Maybe someone was there. Someone who could help. Ranger barked again, his tail wagging slowly, and together they pushed forward. A final burst of energy got them up a small hill. There, nestled in a clearing surrounded by evergreens, was a small cabin. Smoke trickled from a crooked chimney. There was no movement, no sound, but the place looked real, solid, like a promise kept. Eli sagged with relief, almost sinking to his knees, but Ranger nudged him onward, circling back and forth between the boy and the cabin. Every step was agony now, but the thought of warmth and the way Ranger kept looking back at him, eyes bright, pulled Eli forward. They reached the edge of the clearing. Eli stared at the cabin, uncertain. Should he knock? Should he yell? He hesitated, fear creeping in. What if nobody was home? Or what if someone was, and they were angry? Ranger took the decision away from him. The dog padded up to the door and barked, loud and deep, the sound echoing off the trees. Then he turned, waiting for Eli to join him. The boy, trembling and barely able to stand, shuffled forward. He reached Ranger's side and clutched the rabbit to his chest. Together they faced the door, two survivors, one old and one young, united by desperation, hope, and the wild, flickering promise that help might finally be within reach. As the wind picked up, the cabin's door rattled slightly. Eli reached out with one numb hand and knocked, his heartbeat thundering in his chest. For a moment, the world went silent. Then, from inside, the faint sound of footsteps. Anna had grown used to silence. It had become her only company in the small, weathered cabin, nestled deep among the fir trees, miles from the nearest neighbor. Most days she relished the quiet. The way snow settled on the porch railing, the slow crackle of the wood stove, the distant echo of wind in the pines. She thought of herself as invisible, a ghost haunting her own life, retreating further from the world after everything she'd lost. That morning, as the blizzard faded, Anna stood by the kitchen sink, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea. She gazed through the frosted window, watching the sky slowly lighten, her thoughts tangled with memories she couldn't put down. Suddenly, a sharp bark shattered the stillness. It was so loud, so close, that Anna's mug nearly slipped from her hands, her heart hammered with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. No one ever came out here. No one except another bark. And then, softer but unmistakable, the sound of someone, knocking on the front door. Anna froze, mug still in hand. She strained to listen, hearing only her own breath for a moment. Was it a trick of the wind, some half-forgotten memory echoing back at her? She shook her head, set down the mug, and stepped to the window, peering through a sliver of clear glass. Her breath caught. There, hunched and shivering on her porch, was a little boy, no more than 5 or 6, wrapped in a blanket, clutching a filthy stuffed rabbit. Beside him, a battered German shepherd stood guard, fur bristling, one paw lifted protectively in front of the child. Anna's mind reeled. How did they get here? Who would leave a child in this weather? And why did that dog look so familiar, so determined, so worn? For a moment, Anna's old instincts warred within her. Fear told her to bolt the door, pretend she hadn't seen anything, and wait for them to leave. Compassion, long buried but not dead, screamed at her to act. Her own pain, the ache that lived in her bones ever since she'd lost her daughter in the custody battle, rose like bile. She thought she'd walled herself off for good, that she could survive by letting the world pass her by. But now, staring at that boy's blue lips and the fierce dog standing between him and the wild, Anna knew she was standing on the edge of something that could change everything. She hesitated for only a moment longer. Then, hands trembling, Anna unlocked the door and pulled it open, letting in a gust of frigid air and the raw scent of snow. Hey, she said, trying to sound calm, but her voice shook. It's okay. You're safe here. Come in. The dog stepped forward first, blocking the entrance as if to test her intentions. Anna knelt down, keeping her movements slow and deliberate, her palm open in a gesture of trust. It's all right, boy. I'm not going to hurt him. Or you. She saw the old scars on the dog's muzzle, the graying fur, the wariness in his eyes. But after a few tense seconds, Ranger relaxed just enough to let the boy shuffle forward. Eli stumbled inside, his cheeks pale, his teeth chattering so hard he could barely speak. He clung to Bunny, the stuffed rabbit, his eyes darting from Anna to the room beyond. Anna scooped him up and wrapped him in a thick wool blanket, rubbing his arms to coax warmth back into his body. You're safe now, she murmured. I promise, you're going to be okay. For a long moment, the boy said nothing. His eyes were enormous, swimming with confusion and fear. Anna busied herself, lighting the fire in the stove and putting on a kettle, her hands steady even though her heart pounded. She glanced back at the dog, who stood between her and Eli, watching every move. She couldn't help but think of her own daughter, how small she'd looked the last time Anna saw her, standing on the porch with her backpack, reaching out for a hug Anna couldn't give. Not then. Not with the social worker watching. The ache returned, sharp as ever. But here now there was something she could do. Anna brought out dry socks, set a steaming cup of broth on the table, and coaxed Eli to sit. What's your name, sweetheart? She asked gently. Eli only stared, holding the rabbit so tightly Anna worried it might tear. She didn't push. Instead, she knelt beside him and whispered, You're not alone, okay? Not anymore. The boy's lips moved, but the words didn't come out. He watched her with haunted eyes, as if daring himself to believe she was real. Meanwhile, Ranger sniffed the air, circled Eli, then finally settled beside the table, keeping his body between the boy and the door. Anna reached out and stroked the dog's head. He didn't flinch. Instead, he pressed his nose into her palm, accepting the comfort with a long, weary sigh. As the morning brightened, Anna moved through the house with purpose, stoking the fire, laying out towels, filling a basin for warm water. She wrapped Eli's feet, helped him change out of his frozen clothes, and gently cleaned the dirt from his cheeks. The boy shivered, but as the warmth crept back, he finally met her eyes for a moment. Anna smiled, a real, unguarded smile she hadn't felt in years. Ranger watched, his gaze softening as he realized the danger had passed, at least for now. The old dog lay at Eli's side, a silent sentinel, while Anna gently combed the boy's hair and murmured reassurances. It was a small miracle, a fragile peace, built in the heart of winter between three survivors who had all lost something, and who, in this moment, had found each other. Outside, the wind howled, but inside Anna's cabin, hope flickered. She had made her choice, not just to let them in, but to fight for them. She wrapped Eli in her arms, whispering, You're safe, I'm here. And in the warm, golden light, something in Anna's heart began to thaw, the cabin slowly filled with life. It began with the simple things, the rush of warmth from Anna's wood stove, the gentle clatter of a spoon in a mug, the patter of Eli's feet as he scurried timidly from the edge of the living room to the kitchen table. Anna moved quietly, never rushing him, careful not to crowd the boy who had shown up at her door on the edge of collapse. Ranger shadowed Eli everywhere, keeping his large, battered body between the child and every possible danger, even Anna herself at first. That morning, Anna made soup, stirring the pot until the rich scent of carrots and potatoes and chicken broth chased away the last bitter traces of night. She poured a small bowl and set it on the table, sliding it closer to Eli. He watched her with wide eyes, unmoving at first. Anna didn't push. Instead, she knelt on the other side of the table and let the boy come to his own decision. After a long moment, Eli edged forward, clutching Bunny in one hand while picking up the spoon with the other. The first taste made him blink. So hot it stung his tongue. So flavorful it made him pause as if trying to remember what real food was supposed to be like. Anna busied herself cleaning up around the kitchen, letting him eat in peace, sneaking glances every so often to see if he needed anything. Ranger sat at the boy's feet, his nose pressed to Eli's ankle, watching as if making sure each spoonful went down safely. When the soup was finished, Anna brought out towels and a basin of warm water. "Let's get you cleaned up, sweetheart," she said softly. Eli didn't move. His eyes darted to the dog, who rose, shook himself, and stepped forward. Anna laughed, her first real laugh in months, and reached out to scratch Ranger's chin. "You too, buddy," she said. "I bet you both could use a bath." She drew Eli a warm bath, filling the old tub until steam rose in soft, twisting ribbons. At first, Eli clung to Bunny, refusing to let go even as Anna gently coaxed him out of his dirty clothes. She washed his hands and face, careful with every scrape and bruise, never making him feel small or helpless. Eli watched her warily, but as the warm water soothed his aches and Anna hummed a gentle song, his eyes slowly closed. He even let her wash Bunny, wrapping the plush in a small towel and setting it near the stove to dry. Ranger, for his part, submitted to Anna's care with stoic patience. She knelt by the hearth and examined his old wounds, scars lacing his flank, one ear notched, a tender spot along his side where the fur grew thin. "You've been through a lot, haven't you, big guy?" Anna murmured. She cleaned his paws, dried his fur, and fed him scraps of leftover stew. Ranger's tail thumped once, a heavy, grateful sound. As the day stretched on, the cabin changed. The silence of loneliness faded, replaced by the music of new beginnings. Eli's footsteps grew bolder. Sometimes he giggled, a quick, shy sound, when Ranger rolled onto his back, legs flailing in the air, inviting him to play. Anna tried not to cry when she heard it, but her heart swelled with a cautious hope she'd thought was gone forever. Eli remained quiet, never speaking more than a word or two at a time. But Anna didn't force him. She understood the language of loss. Instead, she shared small pieces of her own story. While she mended a torn shirt by the window, she told Eli about the daughter she'd once held every night, the laughter that used to echo through these rooms. After she left, everything felt empty, Anna admitted, her voice low. "I forgot how to let people in. But maybe I just needed someone to remind me." Eli watched her, silent but attentive. Later, as dusk crept across the windows and Anna tucked him into the little bed by the fire, he finally spoke. His voice was barely more than a whisper, but it stopped Anna in her tracks. "Eli," he said, holding up Bunny as if for proof. "My name, Eli." Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them. She knelt by his bed and hugged him, not too tightly, just enough so he knew she was real. "Thank you for telling me," she whispered, brushing the hair from his forehead. "Eli, that's a good strong name." Ranger climbed onto the rug, settling his big head in Anna's lap. She stroked his fur, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. Eli reached out, and Anna took his hand, letting him guide her through the darkness of his fear and into the fragile light of trust. The next morning, Eli woke to the sound of bacon sizzling on the stove and the thump-thump of Ranger's tail against the kitchen floor. Anna poured him a glass of orange juice and, as they ate together, she caught him watching her with a hesitant sort of curiosity. Bit by bit, she invited him to help with chores, folding laundry, feeding Ranger, gathering kindling by the woodpile. Each new task was met with uncertainty, then pride, as he realized he could do something right. In the quiet moments, Anna watched Eli as he played with Ranger, the dog's patient, gentle presence helping him laugh and relax. Sometimes Anna would catch the boy tracing the scar on Ranger's ear, or whispering secrets to him in a voice so soft she could barely hear. It was Ranger who coaxed out Eli's first smile, who comforted him through nightmares, who became his shadow in every room. And as the snow fell outside and the fire glowed warm inside, Anna understood that she didn't just want to save Eli for a night. She wanted to fight for him, to offer him a family, even if it was just a small, patched-together one. The thought terrified her, but it filled her with a courage she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, Anna believed in second chances, not just for Eli, but for herself and Ranger too. Together, they were learning how to trust again, one gentle, patient day at a time. Outside the cabin, the world turned white and wild. The snow that had whispered through the trees all morning thickened into a blizzard by afternoon, battering Anna's windows, heaping drifts against the door, erasing every trace of the path that had led Eli and Ranger to her. The sky grew heavy and low, the sun lost behind walls of swirling gray. In the flickering firelight, the cabin became an island cut off from everything, a fragile bubble of warmth and hope suspended in a sea of cold. Inside, Anna tried to keep their little routine going, holding the world at bay with simple acts of care, cooking oatmeal, reading picture books, laying another log on the fire. Ranger stayed close to Eli's side, following him from room to room. Even when Eli played quietly with blocks on the rug or lined up tiny stones along the windowsill, Ranger watched every movement, head tilted, ever alert. But as the storm howled louder, a restless fear began to creep into the corners of the cabin. The lights flickered, the wind groaned against the roof, and every time Anna glanced at the old clock on the wall, it seemed as if the hands moved slower and slower. By evening, a sudden gust rattled the cabin so hard that Eli cried out, and Ranger lunged to his feet, hackles rising. Anna wrapped Eli in a quilt and drew him close, trying to calm her own racing heart. "It's just the wind, sweetheart," she murmured, but the words sounded thin. A few minutes later, the power sputtered and died, plunging the cabin into a hush broken only by the fire's low crackle and the distant wail of the blizzard. Candles flickered on the table, casting long, trembling shadows up the walls. Anna moved through the cabin in the dark, lighting lamps, checking windows and doors, trying to make it all seem ordinary. But in Eli's eyes, she saw a terror that went deeper than the cold, a terror of being left, of the world slipping away. That night, as the storm raged, old ghosts returned. Eli's small voice broke the silence, high and thin. "Mommy?" It was the first time he'd spoken the word in Anna's presence. He clung to her, face buried in her sweater, tears soaking through the cloth. Anna held him tight, rocking back and forth, whispering softly. She sang a lullaby she hadn't sung in years, voice trembling as memories flooded back. her own little girl, lost to a court's decision, and a fate she couldn't change. Ranger, sensing the rising panic, settled himself in front of the door, massive and vigilant. His ears swiveled, nose twitching, body tense as if daring any threat to approach. Every so often, he glanced over at Anna and Eli, then back at the darkness beyond the windows, as if standing guard against every shadow and memory that tried to slip in. The storm battered the cabin deep into the night. Eli trembled with every gust, his fingers digging into Anna's arm. "It's okay," Anna whispered. "I'm here, I won't let go." Her voice, soft but fierce, became an anchor against the storm. Still, her own mind spun with old fears. What if she wasn't enough? What if she failed again? At some point, the wind calmed just enough for Eli to drift into a restless sleep, his face pressed against Anna's chest, Bunny clutched in his fist. Anna lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the fire die down. She thought about all she'd lost, her child, her home, her sense of purpose. She thought about the path that had led her here, to this moment, this second chance. Grief and hope battled in her heart, but as the first gray hints of dawn crept through the frost-glazed window, Anna found herself breathing easier. She watched Eli sleep, his lips parted, one small hand still tangled in her sweater. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "You're safe," she whispered. "I won't let the world take you too." Ranger yawned, then pressed his great head into Anna's lap. She stroked his ears, feeling the quiet strength in his battered body. He had saved Eli, brought him here through the snow and the dark, and now, in his own quiet way, he was saving her too. As the morning light grew stronger, Anna let herself hope. Really hope, for the first time in years, maybe, just maybe, the three of them could make it. Maybe they could build something new out of all their broken pieces. She stood and tucked the blanket more securely around Eli's sleeping form. Then, quietly, she knelt beside Ranger and whispered, "Thank you." The old dog looked up at her, his eyes full of trust and understanding, as if he knew exactly what she meant. That day, the storm began to lift. Anna opened the curtains and watched as the sun slowly emerged, turning the drifts outside into a field of sparkling diamonds. She pressed her hand to the window and made a silent promise. She would not lose another child to the coldness of the world, not if she could help it. She glanced back at Eli, who was waking now, rubbing his eyes with tiny fists. He looked around the warm, golden-lit room, and then at Anna, as if trying to remember if this was real. Anna smiled and held out her hand. "Breakfast?" she asked. He nodded, the fear in his eyes replaced, just a little, by trust. Outside, the storm's scars remained, but inside, the fragile beginnings of a new family glowed. Anna, Eli, and Ranger, three lost souls, brought together by chance and held together by hope, faced the new day, ready to fight for each other, whatever the world might bring. When the storm finally released its grip, the world outside Anna's cabin looked transformed, white, dazzling, silent, but for the drip of melting snow from the eaves. Anna pushed open the front door, shovel in hand, and began the slow work of clearing a path to the woodpile. Her muscles ached, but each scoop of snow felt lighter than the weight she'd carried in her heart for so long. Every so often, she paused to watch Eli, bundled in a quilt on the other side of the frosted window, drawing with a stubby crayon. Ranger sprawled beside him. Inside, the cabin was full of new rituals. Eli laughed at Ranger's antics, his giggles ringing out clear and honest for the first time since his arrival. Anna found herself humming as she swept, marveling at how quickly these two strangers, boy and dog, had begun to stitch themselves into the fabric of her home. The simple acts of making breakfast, finding dry socks, sharing chores, these were building something between them, something that felt, against all odds, like family. But beneath the peace, Anna felt tension brewing, a worry that crept in during the quiet moments. She knew the outside world would not remain distant forever. Someone would come looking for Eli. Someone would have questions, and answers would be demanded that she wasn't sure she could give. She found herself listening for distant engines, scanning the horizon for footprints, rehearsing explanations in her mind. On the third morning after the blizzard, as sunlight glimmered off the icicles and Anna set a kettle to boil, Ranger growled low in his throat. Anna froze, her hands still. Eli looked up, suddenly alert, and Ranger pressed close to the boy, gaze fixed on the snow beyond the window. A figure emerged from the trees, a tall man in a battered red parka, snowshoes strapped to his boots, a yellow search vest slung across his chest. Anna's pulse spiked. She stepped outside, squinting against the glare. The man lifted a gloved hand in greeting. "Ma'am," he called, his voice carrying over the hush of the snow. "Sorry to bother you. I'm with the volunteer search team. Name's Caleb. We're looking for a missing boy, Eli Simmons, 5 years old, brown hair, last seen near the river after the storm hit." His gaze was steady, gentle but determined. Anna's stomach twisted. She nodded, trying to keep her expression neutral. "You must be freezing. Come in. I have coffee brewing." Her voice was calm, her movements steady, but her mind raced with fear. What would happen to Eli if she told the truth? Would they take him away, toss him into the foster system, another number in a cold ledger? Caleb stepped into the warm cabin, eyes scanning the small space. He saw Eli instantly, smaller than in the missing posters, cheeks pink from the fire, pressed against Ranger's side. The relief on Caleb's face was immediate and profound. "That's him," he breathed. "Thank God. We've been looking everywhere." Anna's heart pounded as she poured Caleb a cup of coffee. She sat across from him, her hand resting protectively on Eli's shoulder. The boy looked from Anna to the stranger, fear flickering behind his eyes, so Ranger growled, low and warning. "I know you want to protect him," Caleb said gently, "but we have to call the authorities. There are procedures, people who care about this boy and want to make sure he's safe." Anna's own loss rose up, bitter and sharp. She remembered the day the state had taken her daughter, the coldness of the process, how powerless she had felt as strangers judged her worthiness to love her own child. She looked at Eli, his small hand gripping her sleeve, and at Ranger, who had saved them both. "And if the system fails him," she demanded, her voice trembling, "what if he just gets lost again?" Caleb nodded, setting down his mug. "I get it. My sister grew up in the system. I know it's not perfect. But we can't keep him hidden here. It's not fair to you or him. There are ways to help. Emergency placements. Sometimes the rules bend for the right reasons." Anna's eyes filled with tears, anger, and fear colliding in her chest. "He's safe here. He trusts me. Please, just let us have a little more time." Caleb studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "What if I call it in as a found child, but recommend you for kin-like placement? It's not the usual way, but you've been here for him. You could foster him, maybe even adopt, if you're willing to jump through some hoops." Anna's hands shook. She looked at Eli, his face tight with worry, his trust fragile as glass. She glanced at Ranger, who wagged his tail once as if urging her forward. "Would you help us?" Anna whispered. Caleb smiled. Yeah, I'll help. You just have to be honest with social services. Show them what I see, a boy who is safe, loved, and healing. He rose and pulled out his phone. I'll stay with you, walk you through the process. You won't be alone. Relief crashed over Anna, almost knocking her breathless. She hugged Eli, tears slipping down her cheeks. It's okay, she murmured. We're going to fight for this, for you, for all of us. Later, as the sun dipped low and Caleb made the call, Anna sat on the porch steps. Eli curled in her lap. Ranger pressed against her side. She gazed at the mountains, the snow now glittering gold and blue in the evening light. She didn't know what would happen next, what questions the state would ask, what judgments they might pass. But she knew she wouldn't run. Not anymore. She had chosen Eli. She would choose him again, every day, inside, as the fire crackled and the scent of baking bread filled the cabin. Anna whispered to herself a promise she intended to keep. I will fight for you, as long as it takes. You are not alone. Ranger, as if understanding, lifted his head and let out a quiet, triumphant bark. Together they waited for whatever would come, family by choice, braced for the battle ahead. Winter melted slowly in the mountains. Weeks passed, and the snow that once barricaded Anna's cabin softened into slush, then streams, then patches of green fighting up through the muddy earth. For the first time in years, the change in seasons felt like more than a calendar page. It felt like hope itself, cautious, trembling, but unmistakable. Inside the cabin, the air had changed. Sunlight warmed the wood floors each morning, and laughter, real, unfettered laughter, echoed through the rooms. Anna was different now. She still woke some mornings tangled in old fears, but she no longer let them rule her days. She let Eli help with everything, kneading bread dough, filling the bird feeder, braiding her hair when his small hands grew bold. Each gesture, each question he dared to ask, built another brick in the fragile house of trust they were making together. Eli blossomed. He was no longer a shadow moving quietly from room to room, but a little boy whose giggles chased away the last ghosts of winter. He asked for stories, about Ranger as a puppy, about Anna's childhood, about the first day he came to the cabin, which he remembered now as the day the dog saved me. He still woke from nightmares, still sometimes hid under the bed when a branch tapped the window or the wind rattled the door. But every time he crawled out a little quicker, reaching for Anna's hand or Ranger's warm fur. Ranger, for his part, was a dog transformed. His limp grew less pronounced as spring dried the ground and warmed his old bones. He fetched sticks in the yard, dozed in the patches of sun on the porch, and let Eli braid wildflowers through his collar. But his greatest joy was following Eli from room to room, sleeping at his feet, always alert to any shadow or worry that might threaten his small family. It wasn't perfect. Healing never is. There were rough days when Anna's memories flooded back and she had to bite her tongue not to cry in front of Eli. There were moments when Eli froze at the sound of an unfamiliar voice on the radio, or the sight of a strange car on the drive. Sometimes Anna doubted herself, wondered if she'd ever really be enough to fill the hole in Eli's heart, or in her own. But every time doubt crept in, something small would remind her why she kept fighting. Eli's arms wrapped tight around her waist. The way he whispered, "I love you," to Ranger before falling asleep. The pure relief in his eyes whenever Anna told him, "I'm not going anywhere, not ever." Then one bright morning, the test arrived. A blue sedan pulled up outside, dust trailing in its wake, and a woman stepped out, Mara, the social worker. She was neat, precise, with a soft smile and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Anna's heart thudded. She wiped her hands on her jeans, looked at Eli, and took a deep breath. "Remember what we talked about, honey? Mara just wants to see that you're okay." Eli nodded, biting his lip. Ranger pressed close, sensing the tension in the room. Anna opened the door, and Mara stepped in, greeting Eli first, then squatting down to let Ranger sniff her hand. "You must be Ranger," she said, her tone warm. "I've heard all about you." Mara's visit was gentle but thorough. She walked through the cabin, noting the neatness, the safety measures, the coloring pages on the fridge. She asked Anna about routines, meals, bedtime, how they handled nightmares and arguments. She sat with Eli at the table, talking about Bunny and bread baking and what made him happy. Eli was shy but honest, clinging to Bunny, peeking at Anna as he answered. Finally, Mara asked Anna to sit with her. The questions became deeper, about Anna's past, her daughter, her choices. Anna didn't hide the truth. She spoke of grief and loneliness, of the day she found Eli and how she hesitated before letting him in, afraid she'd be hurt again. "I'm not perfect," Anna said, voice trembling but clear. "But I love him, and I love this dog who saved him. We're not much, but we're a family now, and I'll fight for that as long as I live." Mara took notes, her expression unreadable. She turned to Eli. "Do you feel safe here?" she asked. Eli's answer was barely a whisper, but it carried across the table. "Yes, Anna makes pancakes. Ranger sleeps in my bed. I don't want to go." There was a pause. Mara's eyes softened, and she nodded. "Sometimes the right family finds you when you're lost," she said. The next day was the hearing. Anna dressed Eli in his cleanest shirt and jeans, brushed his hair until it shone, and walked into the courthouse with her head held high. Ranger walking beside them, leash loose but present. In the courtroom, Anna faced not just the system, but her own fear, that she'd lose Eli the way she'd lost her daughter. The judge asked hard questions, and Anna answered with honesty, never shying from the truth. She spoke of Ranger's role, how the old dog had sensed every unspoken need, how his presence had healed both her and Eli in ways words could not. She told the story of that night by the river, of the snow and the terror and the rescue, and how all three of them had chosen each other when the world had turned its back. When Eli was called to speak, he walked bravely to Anna's side, holding Bunny and Ranger's leash. He looked up at the judge and whispered, "Please don't make me leave my family." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge seemed moved. Mara, the social worker, stood and said, "Eli is thriving. He's safe, he's loved, and he's healing. I recommend that Anna be granted permanent guardianship, and that Ranger remain as part of this family." The gavel fell. Relief, pure, overwhelming, impossible, swept through Anna. She knelt and hugged Eli, tears streaming down her face, Ranger nosing into the embrace as if he understood the moment's gravity. They had done it. They had fought and won, not just for themselves, but for the promise that second chances were real. As the sun set outside the courthouse, Anna, Eli, and Ranger stepped into the spring air together, a little imperfect family, whole at last, and ready to begin again. Late spring transformed the mountains. Sunlight poured through every window of Anna's cabin, painting golden shapes across the floor, setting the kitchen table aglow. Where shadows once lingered, warmth now danced, a living testament to the new life Anna, Eli, and Ranger had built together. The cabin itself looked changed. The door, once warped and cold, stood wide open most days, letting in fresh air and the music of birdsong. Anna had filled the windowsills with jars of wildflowers Eli picked from the meadow. His childish scrawl, drawings of stick-figure families and a floppy-eared dog, taped proudly to the fridge. There was a new shelf for books, and a coat hook where Eli's small jacket hung next to Anna's, and a blue leash for Ranger. Their days found a steady, joyful rhythm. Anna woke to the sound of Eli's laughter, Ranger's nails skittering across the floor as he bounded to greet them both. There were chores, feeding chickens, mending fences, hauling water from the well, but none felt heavy anymore. Work was shared, and even the simplest tasks became games when done together. Eli bloomed in the gentle soil of belonging. He raced through the grass barefoot, squealing with delight as Ranger chased him in wide circles. He asked questions about clouds, about the stars, about the before times, and Anna answered each one, patient and honest. Sometimes he still woke from bad dreams, tears streaking his cheeks, but now Anna was there to hold him until he slept again. Ranger curled around them both. No longer did Eli hide under the bed. When shadows came, he met them with the courage learned in the circle of his new family's love. Anna, too, was transformed. Where once she kept the world at arm's length, she now welcomed it in. Neighbors came by with pies and seedlings. Mara stopped for coffee and to check on Eli's latest drawings. Anna told her story, not as a tragedy, but as a lesson in the power of second chances. "Family isn't what you're born into," she said one afternoon, as she and Mara watched Eli and Ranger play. "Family is what you build, what you choose, and sometimes what you're lucky enough to find when you least expect it." Ranger was the heart that tied it all together. No longer the limping stray, he now carried himself with quiet pride. He had his aches, yes, but they slowed him little. He patrolled the yard, slept at Eli's feet, barked at crows, and dozed in the sun. He became a fixture in the little mountain community, a hero in every child's imagination, a companion to Anna, and the unwavering guardian of a boy who had once been lost. One afternoon, as the sun turned the fields gold, Anna sat on the porch with a mug of tea. Eli giggled in the grass, tossing a stick for Ranger, who bounded after it with an energy that belied his years. Anna watched them, her boy and her dog, bathed in light and laughter, the old pain inside her replaced by a profound gratitude. She had not just found them. They had saved her, too. Mara stopped by, this time not as a social worker, but as a friend. She leaned against the porch rail and smiled at the scene. "You look happy, Anna," she said softly. "I am," Anna replied, her voice steady. "Happier than I ever thought I'd be again." She glanced at Eli and Ranger. "I thought my life was over when I lost everything. I never imagined healing would come in the shape of a scared little boy and a limping old dog." Mara nodded. "You've built something beautiful here. You know that, right?" Anna smiled, warmth welling in her chest. "I'm starting to believe it." Eli ran to her, cheeks flushed, hair tangled, Ranger close at his side. "Anna, watch me!" he shouted, showing off a new trick. Anna clapped and cheered, heart full to bursting. She caught Mara's eye and knew. This was the legacy she wanted. Not riches or perfection, but a family created by love, made strong through forgiveness and courage. Later, as twilight settled, Anna tucked Eli into bed. He yawned and reached for Bunny, the old plush rabbit now washed and mended, the stuffing replaced in places with Anna's own careful stitches. Ranger jumped up, circling once before settling with a sigh at the foot of the bed. "Will you stay forever?" Eli asked sleepily. Anna brushed the hair from his forehead. "As long as you want me," she whispered. "Forever and ever." Outside, the mountains stood silent and watchful, guardians of 1,000 stories, of loss and finding, and everything in between. Anna knew their story would echo here for years to come, not because it was extraordinary, but because it was proof that broken things can be made whole again. So as the days passed, Anna found herself reaching out to others, a letter to her estranged daughter, a call to an old friend, a meal shared with a lonely neighbor. She learned slowly that giving hope away never diminished her own. In fact, it only made it grow. On the anniversary of the night Eli and Ranger came into her life, Anna organized a picnic. Friends from the valley arrived with food and laughter. Children ran wild with Eli and Ranger, and the sun hung warm over it all. At the end of the day, Anna stood and spoke. If you have the chance to be someone's hope, take it. You never know whose life you might change, including your own. The ripple of that choice spread out into her home, her friendships, her community. Where once there had been only silence and fear, now there was connection and kindness, woven together by the simplest, bravest act, opening her door and saying yes. As the sun set behind the mountains, Anna, Eli, and Ranger sat together on the porch, a little imperfect family, but complete. Eli waved at Mara as she left. Ranger leaned his head against Anna's knee, and the world felt, for once, exactly as it should. Their story, born from loneliness and courage, had become a legacy of hope, one that would last, one that might inspire others to open their own doors, to find and build family wherever love and second chances might lead.